Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The NFL Show, as always, is brought to you by Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com. I am your host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
Doing great, Mike. How about you?
All right, and we have a special guest today. Help us welcome to the show, Steve Risser. Did I get your name right?
Yep, you did. Yep, Risser. Some people call me Risser, but you got it right with Risser.
All right. Well, that's the thing. Usually I'll get it right and Sam will screw it up if you've watched it before. And I know, Steve, you have your own podcast. You want to tell people?
Yes, I do. It's called Sports Talk with R and J. It airs every Wednesday at 2:00, and it's on Clovercrest, part of Clovercrest Media Group, and it's on clovercrestmedia.com too. So make sure you check out I'll post a link later on today, but make sure you check that out. It's on clovercrestmedia.com, and it airs every Wednesday at 2:00.
All right, we're bigger than them. Why don't you just do your show for us?
I got to see without that. Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to preview all the games, pick them that are happening on Sunday, but we're going to start off with last night where the Chicago Bears ran a record to 4-1 with a 20-19 win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And me and Sam both thought that the Bucs would win this game. Steve, I think I saw you pick the Bucs also. I think the glaring thing here that we learned is the Bucs defense isn't too bad. They've got great skill position players. They got a great quarterback. But, Sam, the offensive line is suspect to say the least.
Yeah, it's some real issues there. And Khalil Mack all night was getting on Tom Brady. I think they actually called off maybe 1 or 2 of his sacks to the penalties as well. So he only had 2 sacks one night. He might have had 4, honestly. They just referees didn't throw so many flags. It felt like there were way too many penalties last night. And really, when I look at this, I mean, Brady didn't have a bad game. It wasn't great. He was 0 for 6 on throws from 20 yards downfield or more. But then again, he doesn't have O.J. Howard, doesn't have Chris Godwin. His options are limited. I really am having trouble pinpointing exactly how good the Bucs and Brady are this year. I think they're still a very good team. I just don't know if they're ever going to be an elite team.
Now, the question is, Steve, are the Bears an elite team now? They're 4-1. Nick Foles was 30 for 42 for 243 with a touchdown and an interception. My opinion is they're not an elite team, but maybe you have a different take on them.
They're not an elite team, but I think they obviously potentially can make the playoffs. I like Matt Nagy as the head coach. Right now, he's probably one of the leaders for Coach of the Year. I mean, you look at some of the wins they've had. I mean, they came back to beat the Lions. They came back to beat the Falcons, and they won a game no one thought they were going to win last night. They've won 4 games by 4 scores. That's a tribute to Matt Nagy and the job he's done. I like how they went to Nick Foles. I think Nick Foles at times struggled last night, but at the end of the game, he made the big drive to get them into field goal range. I think their defense is not great against the run, but I think they can get pressure with Robert Quinn and with Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack's a monster. And this defense, whenever they've needed to make a stop, they've made a stop. So, yeah, the Bears, talent-wise, they're not great, but they've won the close games. And right now they're 4-1, and I don't think they'll win the division. I think the Packers are superior to the Bears just because of the quarterback play. But I think the Bears, I think they have a chance to be a wild card team.
Yeah, well, right now with the extra wild card, Sam, if you've got 4 wins sitting here, you got a pretty good shot to be that wild card. Probably takes 4 or 5 more maybe to even get you in. My question with the Bears, though, is this. Defense is good. Nick Foles, I think you could call him a slightly above average quarterback. But the issue with a team that, is predominantly a defensive team is you have to be able to run the ball. And I don't know that the Bears have the running game to be able to finish this off and have a 10 or 11 win season.
No, I've been critical of David Montgomery since last year's rookie season. And really, they moved on from Jordan Howard way too soon. Because Jordan Howard was their power back. I know he was turning in the wrong direction, but at the same point, they went down to Tariq Cohen and David Montgomery. Now Tariq Cohen's hurt, so you lose your versatile return man, your versatile out of the backfield kind of receiving bag. You're left with David Montgomery. And between him and that offensive line, there's just not enough there. I mean, last night alone, against a really defensive front, 10 rushes for 29 yards. I mean, really, this is a bad running team. This team's not going to be able to be a 2-dimensional offense, and really that's what's going to kill them in the end, is they have no offensive firepower at either spot.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the Sunday games. It's enough of the Bears and Bucs for now, because I still think when I look at this, correct me if I'm wrong, I'll give you both a shot at this, Steve, first. I still expect the Buccaneers to go farther than the Bears.
Oh, absolutely, without question. I mean, the Buccaneers, they've had guys in and out of the lineup. Fournette's been banged up. Evans was banged up last night. Godwin's been out. So, I think their front seven is one of the best in football. The issue with their defense is their secondary. You saw Justin Herbert throw in that secondary. You saw Carlton Davis with that bad pass interference call. and that led to a Bears field goal. So I definitely think the Bucs, they're starting to just get the pieces together. I definitely think they're a better team than the Bears, even though the Bears won last night.
Sam, agree or disagree?
I'm with you on that one. I mean, there's so many injuries right now to this Bucs team. You have to wonder if they're ever going to get healthy. Because we know there are certain teams that just don't for some reason. Like we say, they'll get healthy later in the year, and it just doesn't happen. It happened in Philadelphia last year. But hopefully, if you're a Bucs fan, you're really hoping that all these Pro Bowl caliber players that you have just are able to come back and be healthy going to the playoffs.
All right, let's go to Week 5 Sunday games. Of course, we got more positive tests for the coronavirus or hurricane that could possibly force a game to be moved. Several prominent players out with major injuries. The news has not been good over the last few weeks for the NFL. And while the on-field product has remained relatively strong, I think there's a growing list of issues here that certainly have to be a concern, Steve.
Oh, yeah, I think they got to easily go to a bubble for the postseason. I mean, you just can't have this happen in the playoffs. Games get moved around like this. Obviously now people are kind of realizing the Titans probably broke protocol with all the players, the outbreak they've had. So I'm thinking they're going to struggle to finish this season. I think they definitely got to go to a bubble for the postseason.
Do you agree with the bubble, Sam?
I mean, we saw baseball move to a bubble for the postseason. I don't know if you could do it with all the player personnel you have to have for football teams. It just doesn't seem like a likely scenario. And we saw through the first 4 weeks, we were relatively clean. We really didn't have much of a problem. It was that one instance that Tennessee had an issue, and then things kind of spread from there. Really, I don't think you need a bubble for the postseason, but if you're the NFL and you want to guarantee that everything goes off without a hitch, you either need to enforce stricter rules and protocols by putting your own personnel on teams or to travel with teams to enforce rules, or maybe you consider a bubble. I don't see it happening, but I certainly will look at that.
It's hard to enforce rules with grown men that are millionaires for the large part, too.
Well, yeah, that's also an aspect. It's much easier with someone like with college kids, but with people who are multimillionaires, it's probably not going to happen.
All right, we're going to start off in Seattle with the undefeated Seahawks battling the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are 1-3. They do have Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson. They've averaged 26, 27 points a game so far. They topped 30 in 3 of those games, and they're still 1-3. The Seahawks are in the midst of what looks like the first MVP season for Russell Wilson. When I look at this game, guys, I got to go with Seattle, but I think Minnesota can stay in this game. And I think the key here is a big game by Dalvin Cook would lead to, deep shots down the field from Kirk Cousins out of play action, which I think would give him a chance. But overall, I think the Vikings secondary is terrible. I think Seattle's going to light them up. I think this is going to be probably the highest scoring game of the week, and I'm going to take Seattle, Sam.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm taking Seattle as well, but this is a game that I wouldn't be shocked if it's 35-42. And really, I can see Seattle going out and putting up 40 points on the Vikings because their cornerbacks are so young or so bad. They also haven't had much of a pass rush. Daniel Hunter hasn't been able to play this year. And they have Anthony Barr's out for the year as well. So they have issues and injuries at all levels of that Vikings defense. Meanwhile, Russell Wilson's playing out of his mind with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the other side. The only savior that potentially happened for the Minnesota Vikings is Kirk Cousins goes out there, Dalvin Cook plays well, they get the play action going, and you start hitting Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson down the field. Otherwise, this game's already over.
Now, the one thing that worries me here, Steve, by picking Seattle is the fact that Jamal Adams, quarterback Quinn Dunbar, and linebacker Jordan Brooks, all three look like they're going to miss this game, which is going to make it more difficult. But I still think Seattle wins in a shootout. The question is this: would you give the 7 points?
That's a tough one. I would, because you know what? It's Kirk against Russell Wilson, and I just think, Kirk Cousins might move the ball, but I think Minnesota might get field goals where Seattle is going to end up getting touchdowns. I don't think Seattle's going to have an issue moving the ball against this Minnesota defense, even though Mike Zimmer's a good defensive coordinator, good defensive coach. They haven't played well all year. But for the Vikings, I do think they move the ball in this game. And I think with Adams out, Cook might have a better game because Adams is really good at stopping the run. So I think Minnesota will move the ball. But I would give Seattle the 7 points just because Russell Wilson is a far better quarterback than Kirk Cousins.
All right. Next up, the Indianapolis Colts at the Cleveland Browns. Sam Teets is a big-time Cleveland Browns hater, and it made him look bad last week when I was the only one on the show to pick Cleveland to beat Dallas. Now, after allowing 27 points against Jacksonville in week 1, the Colts have allowed a total of 29 points over the last 3 weeks. Competition has not been great. The Browns, on the other side, are a small underdog at home despite coming off 3 consecutive wins, 2 of those against teams that may be kind of questionable when we're talking about how good they are. But with Nick Chubb out for several weeks with a knee injury, Steve, do you like the Colts here? Do you think the Browns will get enough out of Kareem Hunt, OBJ, and Baker Mayfield to win their fourth game?
I think the Browns get enough out of Hunt, OBJ, and Baker and Landry. And here's the reason why. Darius Leonard might not play this game either. He's questionable, which could definitely open things up for Kareem Hunt. I think Odell Beckham is back to playing really, really good football. I think last year he had kind of a down year. As a Giants fan, I'm up and down on OBJ because of the attitude, but he's still an outstanding player. He's a top 10 receiver in the game. And I think it's going to be, honestly, a really, really close competitive game. I think it's going to go back and forth. It's weird when you have 2 3-1 teams with 2 kind of average quarterbacks, but I'm going to take the Browns at home close in this one.
All right, Sam?
Yeah, I'll take Cleveland as well, just because I really do trust their offense more than I trust Indianapolis at this point. And that defense is overrated. I mean, Darius Leonard is a great player. DeForest Buckner on the line. They're both great players. But that secondary has played very weak competition, and they just abused it early in the year. They look really good because of the teams they played, and they play a Browns offense that has the opportunity to go out there and light them up because they have the piece they put in place to be able to put up 40 points a game. I think the Colts defense is going to get exposed here, and the Browns are going to go and get maybe a 10 to 15-point win.
All right. I think you're both nuts, and this is the reason why. I think what we're missing here is you're only going to have one of these running backs. DeForest Buckner, that Colts defensive front is good. If they can shut down the run or slow down the run, then they're forcing Baker Mayfield to make plays to beat them. And I talked about this last week. I think Baker's done a great job the last 2 or 3 weeks because they've been running the ball. He's been managing the game. My question is, what happens if, we're middle of the second quarter and they can't run the ball and they're having to pass? I think what happens and what we've seen, the MO from Baker Mayfield, is he'll make a couple big mistakes. Phillip Rivers, while he's like old as Methuselah and he hasn't looked that good lately, I'll still take Phillip Rivers over Baker Mayfield if it becomes a shootout, even though the receivers are a lot better with the Browns. And the other thing that keeps sticking in my mind is this. Every time Cleveland gets excited as a city because they think their team is good, they come out and they pee down both legs. So I think what happens here is the Colts win this game similar to the way they beat the Bears. I think maybe a 20-13 game. But I think the Colts are the better team. I think they've got the better coach. I think they've got the better quarterback. They've got the better defense because Cleveland has issues on defense. Cleveland also has issues on the offensive line. So if the run game can get shut down, I think Cleveland run blocks well. I don't think they pass block well. And if this comes to a game where all of a sudden Baker's got to throw for 300 yards to win the game, I don't think he can do it. So I'm going to go with the Indianapolis Colts here to beat the Cleveland Browns. All right, next up, Sam, we have probably the most important game of the week because it has probably, the most popular franchise in professional football, the Cincinnati Bengals, traveling to Baltimore to take on the Ravens.
I was wondering if you were going to say Pittsburgh for a moment. I was going to be like, that's very nice of you, Mike, but then you said Cincinnati. So, I'm picking the Ravens here. None of us are not picking the Ravens, right? It's Baltimore at this point. I know you're not a big Lamar Jackson fan, Mike, but at the same time, they're better coach, significantly better coach. They have better defense. The offensive line significantly better, even though Alex Rodens is going to help Cincinnati out a little bit in that aspect. Baltimore is just the better team here. It's going to be a close game for maybe 3 quarters, maybe 2 quarters, but the Ravens will pull away eventually.
All right, Steve?
This is all going to depend. Lamar Jackson playing or not could depend on if this game is going to be close or not. I think if Lamar Jackson plays, Lamar Jackson's kind of a front-running player. When he's behind, he has trouble playing from behind. But when he's ahead, the Ravens are fine. They're able to run the football. If Lamar plays, I think they'll be able to run the ball pretty easily against Cincinnati, against this Bengal defense with J.K. Dobbins, Mark Ingram, and Gus Edwards. I think they'll be able to run the ball. And I think on the defensive side of the ball, the Ravens will be able to get pressure on Joe Burrow. Even though I like Joe Burrow and that offensive line, it was better last week, but it struggled. And I do like if RG3 plays, I think the game will be competitive. But I think if the Ravens play, I think they win by at least 2 scores. If Lamar Jackson plays, I think the Ravens win by at least 2 scores.
So you're flustered because you know the Bengals are coming, Steve. And the thing is, they are. This is a team with Joe Burrow that I think will be in almost every game they play. I think they'll be in this game. I think the difference is when you look at the Bengals without Geno Atkins, it's not so much that they don't have Geno Atkins. It's the fact that they only had 4 defensive linemen that played more than 20 snaps last week. So they're playing 4 guys constantly. This is a Ravens defense or offense that's just going to run the ball at them constantly, and they're going to use all 3 running backs they've got. So I think this is a game that is close for 2.5 quarters. And then I think the Ravens just kind of slowly pull away at the end of the game. I'm telling you this, though, is a 14 or 13-point spread right now, just because of Joe Burrow. If I had to bet this game, which I'm not because they don't have to, I would take the Bengals into points. But I'm taking the Ravens to win straight up. I think something like 30-20.
Now, I agree with you. I think that's a reasonable assumption because I really think Geno Atkins is actually going to play this week, isn't he? I can look that real quick.
You can look it up real quick. I'm not going to hold my breath. I mean, it would help. And actually, if you put Geno Atkins there, it helps. The other thing that helps is the Bengals are better at the linebacker position, which last year was a huge weakness and a big reason why they couldn't stop the run. I think the bigger question is, does Logan Wilson play, who's been out with a concussion? You got the Gaither kid, who they drafted, I think, the 3rd round, who's played well. So there's some pieces there. But I think the Bengals, similar to Steve, you're a Giants fan, right?
I know. Similar to our game this week. Yep.
No, I would say it's similar. The Bengals are in a similar state as the Giants, where the Giants, I think, defensively, they're not a bad football team. The Bengals on offense are a really good football team. The only difference between the Bengals and Giants is the Giants don't have a quarterback.
No. Daniel Jones has been absolutely terrible. I mean, you could say Saquon's out and the offensive line is terrible, but Daniel Jones is always making that one bad turnover a game. And the way he's played, 2 touchdowns, 5 picks, he's got one of the lowest quarterback ratings in the league. It's not making Giants fans believe that he's the guy.
Yeah, we'll get to the Giants in a minute.
Yeah.
Next
one. Hey, Mike, Geno Atkins is playing this week. Geno Atkins is playing this week.
Good for him. Can he play right tackle for Bobby Hart? And I know Steve knows why I say that. Since he's
I know Bobby Hart. He's horrendous, yes.
Bobby Hart is the worst football player to ever play in the NFL.
I agree.
Yeah. It almost looks like he's playing on just with one leg and one arm half the time.
Terrible.
And it's the inside leg and the inside arm because everybody just runs awry his fat ass. Next up, Las Vegas Raiders will go to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. I think the Raiders are a team that's a year or two away from possibly being really good. This is not that year. I think that the Chiefs take care of this game. I think you get something like 34-17, Steve.
Yeah, I predicted it 34-20. I think that the Chiefs will be able to do whatever they want on offense, run the ball with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Mahomes will have a big day offensively. I think the Raiders will score a little bit, but they're not going to be able to keep up, obviously, with Patrick Mahomes. I got the Chiefs winning by 2 scores.
Well, I think this, and I've seen a lot of people say, well, the Chiefs play down to their competition. I don't think that's the case with the Chargers. I think the case with the Chargers is the Chargers are a team that actually defensively is built pretty well to be able to deal with the Chiefs because you got a front 4 where you don't have to blitz Patrick Mahomes. The problem with the Raiders is they don't have that, Sam.
No, they certainly don't. I would argue that when healthy, the Chargers might even have a better secondary than the Raiders at this point. And meanwhile, I'm interested to see really if Chris Jones plays, because I think he missed last week. If he plays and Frank Clark is healthy as well, I would look out for Derek Carr. The fumbling problems have been the issue for him already this year. And if you got Chris Jones and Frank Clark coming at you, you could see Derek Carr lose a couple balls this week.
Yeah, I hate to see a man lose a couple balls. Next up, Philadelphia Eagles will travel to Pittsburgh to battle the Steelers. The Steelers are 3-0, but we all know they're overrated with a bunch of 300-pound women to cheer for him and Sam Teets. Sam, do you like the Steelers here?
Yes, I like the Steelers here. I know the Eagles have gotten
nobody likes the right Steelers, Sam.
Well, maybe the Eagles are turning a little bit in the right direction here, but Pittsburgh, I mean, maybe I'm interested to see how that bye week, the time off affects them. Hopefully they come out here, they're able to continue the momentum they had through the first 3 weeks of the season. I think Pittsburgh's just a better team right now. They're healthier, and frankly, and they have their ducks in a row as opposed to Philadelphia, which seems to be struggling a little bit with finding its identity.
All right, Steve.
As a Giants fan, I hate the Eagles, and I enjoy seeing them not be good.
The Steelers too.
No, I don't hate the Steelers. I don't mind the Steelers. I don't mind the Steelers. I don't mind the Steelers.
He won't be back on the show. Go ahead.
I think this is going to be a competitive game, though. I mean, I think that for the Eagles, Carson Wentz was a little bit better last week, but it helped the Eagles. They played a backup quarterback, but I think he's good for a turnover game, and I think the Steelers are going to get pressure on him. And I think Big Ben, even though I don't love the Steelers' skill guys, I think he's going to make less mistakes than Carson Wentz, and that's going to be the difference in the game. And I got the Steelers winning by a touchdown.
Well, I think this. Normally, I would take Carson Wentz to make less mistakes than Ben Roethlisberger, but in the situation they're in, I mean, Carson Wentz is a mistake waiting to happen because you kind of got to force them to try to score some points here. I think the Eagles' defense has actually played above average football. I think it's played good enough to keep them from getting blown out. but I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are the better team here. The only thing I'd worry about is I do think the Eagles have the better coach.
I'm not going to go.
Tomlin's been there for 14 years and won a Super Bowl.
What the hell does that matter? Marvin Lewis was in Cincinnati for 17 years. Does that mean he's a better coach than Doug Peterson?
I'll debate. I could debate you. I mean, Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl against Bill Belichick with Nick Foles. So you have a point there.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a debate because if you remember, the Eagles were not very good. You know, Chip Kelly had already ransacked them before he got there. I think Doug Peterson. I mean, I think the three best coaches in the NFL are basically Belichick, Harbaugh, and Peterson.
Wow.
I think Reed is a hell of a coach. I'd put him 4. I think overall, I think Doug Peterson's guys play really hard for him. I think what he did last year in that season where everybody was hurt was one. I mean, he should have been the coach of the year last year if he wasn't. I don't know who won the award because I really don't care. But because really the coach of the year every year should be Bill Belichick, in my opinion, because he's just better than everybody else. But I really like Doug Peterson. I think he's a hell of a football coach. And I think Andy Reid's a good football coach also, but I also believe this. I believe if you give Doug Peterson those Eagles teams Andy Reid had and this Chiefs team that Andy Reid has, it wouldn't have taken him 20 years to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, you got a point there. And I mean, Doug Peterson, I like how he's into the modern game. He goes for it on fourth and 1. The only argument I have there is a lot of Doug Peterson's teams the last 2 years have been kind of 500 teams until December. And they've gotten hot. And don't forget last year when they got hot, they played against the NFC East and the NFC East. They beat the Giants twice, the Redskins once, and the Cowboys. So they got hot.
But this is the thing. They beat them with taxi cab drivers as wide receivers. The Dallas Cowboys were running with Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper. I mean, they were supposed to beat the hell out of the Eagles. And the point is this. The Eagles, personnel-wise, maybe at the end of last year were the worst team in that division, but they still won the division. And the thing is, when you say a lot of his teams are 500 and then they get hot at the end of the year, it seems to happen every year, Steve. And the key to finding out if somebody's a good coach or not is you look at them week 1, you look at them week 16. Did they get better? If they got better, you're a hell of a football coach.
And that's a good point because that's what happens with Belichick's teams every year. They are always better than they're better at the end of the year than they were at the beginning of the year. So that's a good point there.
Yeah, because how many times in the last 5 years has Belichick been blown out by a Kansas City or whoever, and everybody goes, oh, the dynasty's dead. And then 2 months later, we're watching them in the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
So, to me, it's what happens at the end of the season is what matters. Next up, we've got, I think, maybe the most difficult game to pick this week. The Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons. And I think the Falcons have to be in desperation mode. Coach Dan Quinn's wife has to be looking for houses elsewhere. And the Carolina Panthers, on the other hand, I mean, they have a young, strong defense. They don't have Christian McCaffrey, but Teddy Bridgewater's played really well this year, Steve. Carolina, I think, to me, we talked about Coach of the Year the other day, Sam. Matt Rule would have to be in there right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't throw them out because they're 2-2 right now, and they're playing the Falcons. This is an in-division game, and frankly, while the Falcons might be more talented in offense, the Panthers are playing hard. The Panthers are playing better, and Teddy Bridgewater the last 2 weeks really hasn't been that much worse than Matt Ryan. So you're asking me right now who I'm taking. I'm going with the Panthers because frankly, they look hungrier. They look like they want to win more than Atlanta does.
All right, and they have beaten the Chargers and Cardinals, which are two decent teams, Steve. Do you think they can go to 3-2?
I do think they go to 3-2. I really like the job Matt Rule's doing. Davis and Bonifant have ran the ball well for them. Bridgewater's played well. And for the Falcons, I don't get why Dan Quinn still has a job. He should have been fired. Not after last year, in the middle of last year when they started 1-7. I don't get why he has a job.
I think he should have been fired in the Super Bowl where he didn't run the play clock down under 5
yeah,
seconds.
I know. Yeah, I can't stand the Patriots. I was upset they lost that game.
I love the Patriots, Steve. I do. Yeah. I love the Patriots. I love the Patriots because, see, I hate the Colts and the Steelers. And because of the Patriots, I didn't have to listen to arrogant people like Sam brag about his team.
Yeah, the thing is, I live in Connecticut, so I have to listen to a lot of Patriot fans. So that's why I like the Pats.
I understand your point.
Yeah, but for this game, I think it's going to be a close, competitive game. For the Falcons, Julio Jones might not play. I think it's close and competitive, and I'm taking the Panthers in the upset to win this game.
All right, Sam, did you take the Panthers or the Falcons?
I took the Panthers.
Yeah, I'm taking the Panthers too. They're just the better team right now. They play harder, and I think defensively they are a far superior team to the Falcons. Next up, the New York Football Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott has thrown for 450, 472, and 502. And he's lost all those games. He will play the New York Giants, who I don't know if they've gained 450 yards in the season so far. Steve, do you give your team a chance here?
I think they have a chance, but I don't think they're going to win the game. I mean, you have the Cowboys, the best. They're one of the worst defenses in football, but you got the Giants, who are the worst offense in football. So something's got to give on Sunday. But I think the NFL is an offensive league, and I think Dallas in this game. I hate to say it because I hate the Cowboys more than any team in the NFL. But I think Ezekiel Elliott finally has a really good game because they're not going to be playing from way behind the way they were playing against the Browns and the Falcons. So I think that Zeke has a good game. I think that Dak has a good game. Even though a big injury is Tyron Smith is probably, as they said, as we found out before the show, Tyron Smith is out for the season. They're not going to have Lyle Collins. The problem is, though, the Giants, out of their 10 sacks, 3 of them have been by edge rushers. Kyle Fackrell with 2 and Lorenzo Carter with 1. So I still think Dak Prescott's going to make plays to CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. And for the Giants, I think it'll be their best offensive game of the season because they're playing the Cowboys defense. But I think they'll have some success running the ball with Freeman and Gallman. But it's not going to be enough because Daniel Jones has not played awful. He's going to have a bad turnover in this game like he's had in every game. And I got the Cowboys winning by 10 points.
Yeah, I think the problem here is no matter how good the Giants' defense is, that offense is going to put them in a lot of holes. I don't think there's any way, no matter how well they play, they can hold Dallas under 30. And Sam, I don't think I could see the Giants score 30 on air.
No, I really don't think you could. I mean, at most, I'm giving New York maybe 14 points this game. I think Dallas could get anywhere between 28 to 35 because they have that high-powered offense. The Giants, I'm a little bit concerned about their defensive backs right now. I know they've played better than I expected even so far this year. But right now, the strength of that Giants defense to me is still that defensive line in a sense. So really, this is not the best matchup for them. If they can get pressure on Dak Prescott, maybe that changes the game. Maybe the coaching comes into play there when it's Joe Judge versus Mike McCarthy. But really, it's just too much of a talent difference right now.
All right, next up, the Los Angeles Rams will take on the Washington football team, who are now, I think, just a half game out of first in their division, which will tell you about the NFC East. Even Steve's Giants still have a shot. I think they're only half out. So when we look at the Rams and Washington, the Rams, I think they have done a little bit better than what a lot of us expected this year. And Ron Rivera's answer, if he wants to win the division, is to start Kyle Allen at quarterback. Agree or disagree, Steve?
I got to agree because of the way Dwayne Haskins has played. I mean, Dwayne Haskins has not played. He played well week 1, but the last 3 weeks he has not played well. Kyle Allen was with Ron Rivera in Carolina, also with Scott Turner, the offensive coordinator in Carolina. And for this game, I think this game will be closer than people think because this is the 3rd trip the Rams are taking to the East Coast in 4 weeks. And I watched the Rams last week against the Giants, and I think their defense is decent. Obviously got 2 of the best defensive players in the game with Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. But I don't think they're great at stopping the run. And on the offensive side of the ball, if they can't run the ball, and we've seen this, we saw it in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, if they can't run the ball, Jared Goff isn't the same quarterback. He's not as good of a quarterback. But I do think the Rams win close because I don't think the Redskins are very good. But I think this game is going to be closer than people think.
All right. Do you agree, Sam?
I'm going to have to just take Washington here to be a difference maker because really, if they have Chase Young, and I'm trying to figure out right now if
he's questionable. He's questionable.
All right, well, then he's going to play. If Chase Young plays, I'm taking Washington because, frankly, I think they have enough pieces.
This is not how this game is played. This is Friday. You got to pick somebody to win the game. We can't have an either or.
I'm taking Washington then. I'll take Washington because when they have that defensive front going, when they have that pass rush going, Jared Goff tends to struggle in those kind of situations. Like you said, Steve, no running game. He's a completely different quarterback. Based on how he played last week against the Giants, I think the the Washington football team will have an even better outing defensively than New York did. Really, I could see them winning this game, and this could turn their season around. They might actually go out there and be able to win this division just based on how horrible it's been so far.
All right, the Rams are going to win this game, Sam. I'm sorry. They just are. When you look at it, who's running the ball for Washington?
They got a rookie.
Gibson and McKinnon and McKissick. That's who's running the ball.
Yeah. Who's throwing the ball?
Kyle Allen.
All right. Rams win. Next up, the Miami Dolphins at the San Francisco 49ers. For the record, I think Alex Smith should be starting in Washington, and then I would have picked him. Dolphins at 49ers, Sam.
This is a kind of close one for me. I know that Brian Flores' teams always play hard for him. Brian Fitzpatrick, again, is he's a hit-or-miss kind of guy. the 49ers are so beat up still. They get some pieces back. George Kittle had a big game last week. They lost to Philadelphia, a team that was just struggling all year. Frankly, if you're not healthy, I'm taking the Dolphins here. Because the Dolphins, they've been healthy so far. Their offensive lines performed better than I expected. And when Ryan Fitzpatrick's hot, you can't stop him. So I'm taking Miami.
If Jimmy Garoppolo plays, the 49ers are going to win this game. I think they're going to control the game on the ground with Raheem Mostert if he plays. The injuries are a big thing, but I think that if Garoppolo plays, the Niners will win the game because I don't think with Fitzpatrick the Dolphins will score enough points on that Niners defense to beat them. I got the Dolphins win. I got the Niners winning by 2 scores.
All right, I got the Dolphins winning by 37 points. I thought we were trying to one-up each other. Sam picked the one team, the other, and you said 7. No, I think Miami will win the game because Ryan Fitzpatrick can score points. He also gives up points on his own, but I really think there's issues in San Francisco, and I don't think Garoppolo is going to play. I don't know if it matters if Garoppolo plays. I think the 49ers have issues right now, and this is a Garoppolo who lost to Arizona week 1 at home. So I don't think there's a huge difference between Arizona and Miami. Do you, Steve?
I think Arizona's a better team than Miami. I think they clearly have the better quarterback than the Dolphins do. I think, defensively they're close, but I think Arizona's definitely a better team than Miami.
Whose offensive line's better, Arizona or Miami?
That's close. Might say Miami by a little.
I would say it's not very close. Miami's been very good offensively. Actually, they have only allowed 4 or 6. They've allowed 6 sacks this entire season so far. They've been pretty good.
Yeah, that's why I'm taking Miami because I don't think there's a big difference between Kyler Murray and right now Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, the big difference is this. Kyler Murray's turned the ball over more the last 2 weeks. I mean, I think a lot of people want to anoint Kyler Murray as being this special football player. And he's a special football player. Doesn't mean he's going to be a special quarterback.
Yeah, he's been a better runner than passer so far.
Yeah, he's been an average quarterback. And I think that's what he's always going to be, Sam. I know Sam disagrees with me. That's why I directed it at Sam.
Hold on. He's been more towards the middle of my quarterback power rankings recently. I think he has potential there, but you're right. He's making a lot of mistakes, and he's not throwing the ball very well the last 2 or 3 weeks. I backed off my claims about Kyler Murray from early in the year.
And do you remember all those weeks where I have defended Josh Allen, you've ripped him, and now you've got him at number 4?
I'm losing this battle, Steve. I've been losing this battle for a couple of weeks now, Steve, and you're just getting in the middle of it.
Gotcha.
That's why you got to watch. You got to pick your battles wiser, Sam. All right, next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans, and which should be an absolute thriller. I'm going to take the Texans just because they got Deshaun Watson, Steve.
I'm going Houston. I think this is a back and forth game. I think James Robinson is a big game on the ground for the Jags. I think Gardner Minshew has a pretty good game just because the Texans defense has really struggled this year. And I think Deshaun Watson, because Bill O'Brien's out of the building, I think he has a big game. I think it's a close, high-scoring game, but I got Houston winning.
See, I think they win the game just because Jacksonville has the worst defensive line in the NFL right now. They're not going to be able to pressure Watson, and I think Watson will put up a lot of points. I think I think this is going to be similar to what we saw with Cincinnati against Jacksonville last week, where you'll just have Deshaun Watson take over for Joe Burrow, throw for 300 or 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, and they win the game basically by 2 touchdowns. Ends up being 1 because Jacksonville got a score late. But what do you think, Sam?
No, I'm with you. When you give Deshaun Watson enough time to sit back and examine the field, it's basically over. Even with those receiving options, they still have some speedsters. And I just can't possibly go ahead and put any money in Jacksonville right now based on the fact they burned me in the last couple of weeks. I'm definitely going with Houston.
All right, next up, the Arizona Cardinals at the New York Jets. I'm sorry, Giants, Jets. What the hell's the difference? Steve, what do you think?
Oh, Cardinals win. Cardinals win by a couple scores. Sam Darnold's going to be out for the Jets. I think even though the Cardinals are flying east, I think the Jets are an absolute disaster. Greg Williams and Adam Gase aren't on the same page. Adam Gase should have been fired last week. I got the Cardinals winning by 2 scores.
Sam, this is an easy one to pick, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not picking a team led by Joe Flacco. It's that simple. That's all I have to know.
Yeah, the guy did just win a Super Bowl. You're just mad because he tore the Steelers' ass up a lot.
That was like 5 or 6 years ago. What do you mean just won a Super Bowl?
2012.
8 years ago.
It was still done. When's the last time Ben Roethlisberger won a Super Bowl, Sam?
10 years ago.
2008.
Right?
No, 2008.
12 years?
2000 years ago? Is that what you said, Steve? 2,000 years ago?
2008.
2008? It wasn't that long ago. Oh, yeah, it was because it's Ben Roethlisberger. But since then, he did sexually molest that woman in that bathroom, huh, Sam?
I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I can't. What, you want me to go read the court documents for this thing?
Well, yes, I do. He's
already
proven. He already said he was an alcoholic, and Curtis Stamper says, "How about them Packers?" All right, so Steve, are the Packers the best team in the NFC?
That's a tough one between them and Seattle. I think Rodgers and Wilson are so close, but it's so hard for me. I'm still going Seattle because of the coach and the quarterback. I think I think Green Bay is the better roster, and I think Rodgers has played close to as well as Russell Wilson, but I'm still going Seattle based on that. But it's really close.
All right, Sam.
Now I'm taking Green Bay. I think Rodgers is probably the second best quarterback in the NFL right now behind Russell Wilson. But Green Bay's defense at this point has been significantly better. They have good pieces. They got Jair Alexander, who's a rising cornerback. I like the safety duo they have there. And unlike Seattle's defense, which has pieces, has some talent there, but just hasn't put together, I've seen Green Bay's defense go out and play fairly well. I'm taking the Packers over Seattle.
So in a playoff game, you would take Aaron Rodgers and his Packers over Seattle and Russell Wilson?
That's a different scenario than what you just asked me. But
no,
I think
we're talking about the best team in the NFC. The best team is the team you think is going to the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah. I would take Green Bay over Seattle. I would, just because of the fact this is what happens to the Seattle Seahawks. They get there and they lose one game in the playoffs. They've had this issue the past couple of years. I've seen it.
That's the same issue the Packers have had, Sam.
That's true. I mean, when you put that, that's right. They've been the same way. I just, frankly, in those big-time scenarios, I think the Packers have a more complete team. And really, the Seahawks make kind of mistakes in those situations. I don't think the Packers will have the same issues, especially because, Pete Carroll sometimes makes those dumb calls. We've seen it happen in the playoffs a couple times. I would much rather have the Packers with Aaron Rodgers running the show for the most part.
All right, best team in the AFC, Sam.
I'm still going with the Chiefs. I think it's the Chiefs or the Bills are the two ones we're looking at right now. I'm still going with the Chiefs. They'll figure it out. They had some slow starts so far this year, but by the time playoffs come around, like you said, it's how you finish the year. And frankly, I think they'll finish on a high note.
All right, Steve, best team in the AFC.
Oh, definitely Kansas City. It's definitely Kansas City. I mean, their offense is outstanding, and their defense isn't that bad either, especially when Chris Jones plays. Chris Jones is the second best defensive tackle in the game to Aaron Donald, so definitely Kansas City is the best team in the AFC.
But he's the best pass rushing defensive tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, but
Aaron Donald's overall better. Yeah, Aaron Donald's better against the run. I think the best team in the AFC is the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, he's been saying this last couple of days, and I can understand why you're saying that based on what they've done so far.
If the Bills could play defense the way they did last year, you got a point there. I'll give that to you.
I think they will, and this is the thing. Kansas City last year at this time, we questioned their defense. When you got to Week 11 on, they had the best defense in the NFL. I think Sean McDermott is one of the top 5 coaches in the NFL. I think the guy knows what he's doing. I think Josh Allen, the difficulties we saw with Josh Allen were this. Josh Allen to me is Patrick Mahomes. He's a guy when he came out of college, he had some footwork issues. He had a hard time hitting a hot route, and he had a hard time throwing the deep ball. The difference is Patrick Mahomes went into a situation where it's damn near impossible to overthrow those wide receivers he's got. And now you give Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs to run down the field, and all of a sudden Josh Allen's not as erratic. And I think you look offensive line-wise. Who's better, Sam? Kansas City or Buffalo?
Probably Buffalo. I think Buffalo's been more solid than Kansas City. They've had a couple issues there with the Chiefs.
Yeah, so I think this. I still think there's questions about the Chiefs against teams that are just going to nut up and run the ball down their throat and play action pass them. Because I still think Kansas City has some questions in the secondary, not at safety, but at cornerback. And you got to match one of those guys up with Stephon Diggs. And I also think this. I think Josh Allen's caught a lot of hell over the last few years. But the thing about Josh Allen is he never looked consistently like Mitch Trubisky or Daniel Jones. He was a guy that was just trying to learn to play the game. And remember, we didn't see that with Patrick Mahomes because Patrick Mahomes was not thrown in right away in Kansas City. They held him out a year to try to fix some of the footwork issues they had. They had Alex Smith there already, which they could go to the playoffs with. So I think if you would have saw Patrick Mahomes his rookie season, it would have looked a lot like Josh Allen did his first year or so.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you don't see that often. You don't usually get to a team where Jordan Love's on the Packers this year, so that's happened with him. But you usually don't get to a team in this NFL where you get to sit that year. So that really, really helped Patrick Mahomes, because most of these, top 10 quarterbacks that get taken, they get thrown in because the quarterback they're going up against is not that good. The reason why the team wasn't good is because the quarterback wasn't good. But that wasn't the case in Kansas City when they traded up to get Mahomes. So that 1 year he took off really helped them.
Yeah. So, Sam, have you changed your mind yet?
No, I'm still sticking with the Chiefs.
All right. Remember, you'll have to live with that prediction.
It's okay. I can deal with it. I've been wrong plenty of times before.
You had Josh Allen ranked 17th in quarterbacks.
Listen, I've been wrong plenty of times before, Mike. I've always come out somewhat okay, so we'll figure it out.
All right. So, outside of those two teams, Kansas City and Buffalo, what are a couple teams in the AFC where you could see them jumping up and surprising some people, Steve, and maybe being able to beat a Kansas City or a Buffalo?
I think, obviously, Baltimore is one of those teams. I know Baltimore hasn't been able to play Kansas City. They haven't been able to beat Kansas City, but I think they're still able to run the ball. The thing is, Lamar Jackson's got to learn how to play from behind. He was the MVP last year, but he's got to learn how to play. He's never came back when he's down by more than 2 scores in a game. So he's got to learn how to play from behind. But I still trust Baltimore because of the coaching. I like Lamar Jackson. I like the defense. I like the roster. So I think Baltimore's one of those teams. And obviously another one of them in the AFC, it's pretty obvious, is obviously New England. I mean, the way Cam Newton has played when he's been healthy, the way they played that game in Seattle, their defense played well in the first half against Kansas City. So even though I don't like the Patriots, I still think that the Patriots with Cam Newton have a chance, are definitely a contender in the AFC.
All right, Sam.
I mean, if I had picked 2, I would say Tennessee would be 1, but we don't really know what's going on with them. We'll see them play football again at this point because they've been moving stuff around.
Since we got COVID, none of them are going to die, so they'll still be playing this year, Sam.
Yeah. Well, when we see them come back, Tennessee is definitely a team I would keep an eye on just because they've been good. We saw that happen last year when they got hot. I think they've carried some of that momentum into this year. Another one I wouldn't count out is the Chargers. And not that I'm saying that they're going to make the playoffs necessarily, but I think they're a team that could compete with the best teams in the AFC and give them difficulties because they have a strong defensive front. They have some stuff in the secondary, even without Derwin James. And Justin Herbert, we're still figuring out who he is right now. I'm not 100% sure that he's going to continue playing at a high level throughout the year. But if he does, they have the offensive pieces in place to go ahead and compete with some top defenses.
Yeah, I think the AFC is Kansas City and Buffalo. I think that's it. I don't think Baltimore can beat either one of them in a playoff situation. I mean, number one, the reason Kansas City owns them is because it's a bad matchup for Baltimore's defense. They've got a good secondary in Baltimore, but not the kind of secondary it takes to cover what Baltimore has or what Kansas City has receiver-wise. So I think there's limitations there. And as Steve said, Lamar Jackson has issues when he has to actually play quarterback. When he's running around and they're running their option or he's handing the ball off to 3 different running backs and, throwing a deep ball here or there, he's pretty good. But he's not Patrick Mahomes. I don't think he's near as good as Josh Allen. How about that? I think Josh Allen is a lot better than Lamar Jackson.
That's even though Jackson won an MVP, you got a point there.
This is the thing. MVP a lot of times is just about who's the flavor of the month and who's the guy that's popular. And Josh Allen plays in Buffalo, and, Lamar Jackson is the popular choice. Put it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, but when you look at it, last year, Russell Wilson should have been the MVP.
Oh, absolutely.
I think Russell Wilson should be the MVP every year. I think he's as good as anybody I've ever seen. And I think if you'd have gave him Bill Belichick, he might have went to 15 Super Bowls.
Oh, I couldn't imagine Russell Wilson on the Patriots would have been – I mean, that would have been nasty. That would have been phenomenal for them. If they had Russell Wilson.
Imagine Russell Wilson on the Chiefs.
Also would have been very good. I think they would have won Super Bowls in either position.
Russell Wilson on anybody, things work out pretty good, I think. Unless it's maybe Cincinnati, Cleveland, Jacksonville, the Giants, because if he'd have been a Giant, he'd have had a hard time taking a snap, probably.
Oh, yeah, because Eli never came out and Eli never sat a game. And until the game he got benched.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure if they'd had Russell Wilson, unless they were complete morons in New York, which they have been, I will give you that. Especially
Gettleman needs to be fired. Yeah. Gettleman's terrible.
Gettleman would have traded Russell Wilson for a 7th-round pick and a cup of coffee and then bragged about what a great deal he made. But I do think with the Giants, what do you think of Joe Judge?
I like him. I really do. I think that's the one thing they have is I think this team has competed. They played hard. They've been competitive in 3 of the 4 games. I think with a team that's not been that talented. I mean, even the game they lost Saquon, they were down 17-0 to the Bears, and they were in the game to the final play, and they lost 17-13. Last week, you thought they were going to get blown out. They were competitive. I like Joe Judge. I think he brings discipline, accountability, attention to detail to this Giants team, which they've been missing the last couple of years. Obviously, at the end of the Coughlin years, with the end of the Coughlin years, the McAdoo years, which were a disaster, and then Shermer the last 2 years too. So I like Joe Judge. I just can't stand the GM. I think the GM probably should have been fired last year, and now he's still. And I just can't stand him.
Yeah, Eric Flowers, Bobby Hart.
Oh, that's Jerry Reese right there. That's Jerry Reese. He's another one. He's probably one of the worst.
It's the last decade. I mean, even when they were winning the Super Bowls, their problem. I got a buddy who's a Giants fan. And they would draft all right first 2 or 3 rounds. And I told him, I said, eventually it's going to catch up to you because teams that build a winning franchise, the most important draft picks are 3 through 7 because 3 through 7 is where you build your depth. It's where you get your special teams. And that's what the Giants didn't really have even in those Super Bowl years. And it all kind of fell apart. It's the Bengals had a 5-year playoff run because they drafted 3 through 7 really well. And then when they stopped drafting really well there and they started missing, and then all of a sudden it went back to the same old, same old.
Yeah, that was the difference between Ernie Accorsi and Jerry Reese. Ernie Accorsi was able to get, the Justin Tucks, the Osi Manures, the Chris Snees, the David Deals. Jerry Reese, I mean, he was terrible. I mean, guys like, Reuben Randall, Jerron Housley, guys that just weren't good at all. He drafted. He's drafting. Yeah, you drafted Odell Beckham, but anybody could draft Odell Beckham. The middle round picks were not good from Jerry Reese. Jerry Reese is probably one of the worst executives to have 2 Super Bowl rings because he took over Ernie Accorsi's team in 2007. I'll give him 2011, but he is the reason why the Giants got into this mess, and Dave Gettleman has continued to put them in this mess.
All right. Sam, you got anything we want to discuss before we wrap it up?
I was just going to add a little bit to Steve's point there. From 2008 to 2012, so for 4 or 5 years there, the Giants drafted plenty of players. Only one of those players is still left in the NFL at this point. So for a span there, you weren't drafting anyone good or anyone that has long-term viability in the league. I can definitely understand what you're saying there. The front office has been a mess, and probably it's going to have to restart entirely with a new quarterback at some point here in the very near future.
Absolutely. They didn't move on from Eli quick enough. They gave Eli they stuck with Eli 2 years too long, and they made a mistake. It looks like they made a mistake with this guy.
Yeah. Well, did they really stick with Eli too long? If they turn out and make the correct picks on the offensive line, I mean, Eli still didn't look like a bum 2 years ago, even early last year. And he got the Giants to the playoffs, what was that, 3 or 4 years ago?
2016, yeah.
A team that probably shouldn't have been there. So I don't know if we think that I don't know if Eli was so much done or if it was just kind of beaten out of Eli.
Yeah, a combination of both, I felt like.
But Eli wasn't bad in 2018. The issue is that after that, you really didn't have anyone blocking for him, and you were kind of just left alone on an island.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, all right, Steve, anything else you want to discuss before we wrap it up?
Thanks for having me on, guys, and make sure you guys Sports Talk with R&J every Wednesday, 2:00. It'll be on Facebook Live this week, Wednesday, and ClovercrestMedia.com.
All right, where can we follow you on Twitter?
Steve Risser at Steve1290, and you can follow the show on Twitter at Sports Talk with 9.
All right, Sam Teets, you can follow at Sam Teets33. We will be back Monday to recap all the games from Sunday, and then, of course, do what'll probably be 7 games on Monday night we can preview that we probably just previewed right now once the COVID hits. But I want to remind everybody you can hear this podcast form on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, and over 300 different podcast outlets. You can hear us live every day on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitch, Periscope, few other places I can't remember because I didn't write them down as always. But for now, we're going to go ahead and remind you to check out Replenishing Care and Technologies at rcandt.com. So for Steve Risser, Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening and watching to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.